evening. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the first of two pre hiring summit workshops. As we wait for more folks to trickle in, I'd love to invite everyone to introduce yourselves in the chat and tell us where you're joining from today. Ooh, hi, San Francisco. Lots of NYC representation already. Denver, Los Angeles, more California people. Oh, hey, I saw in Atlanta. I'm right down the road from you in Columbus. All right. More NYC, Connecticut. Cool. All right. Well, my name is Celeste Edge. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the mentoring core support specialist for the Atlanta area with Girls Who Code. Tonight, we have an incredible lineup of speakers who are excited to share their interview tips to help you feel confident for next week's hiring summit and your future job search. In just a moment, I'll introduce you to our panelists. If you have a question for them, you can drop it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your window, as at the bottom of your window, as we will have some time at the end for audience Q&A. Also, please note that closed captioning is enabled. If you'd like subtitles, you can click on the live transcripts show subtitles button at the bottom of your window to turn them on. Now that logistics are out of the way, I am excited to introduce you to our panelists. First up, joining us is Halai Shukran. Halai is a strategic leader with 13 years of experience leading HR teams to success through talent management strategy, employee engagement programs, coaching and development opportunities, and a strong understanding of people analytics. Halai graduated from the University of Virginia with a BA double major in English and sociology. She started her career in journalism before transitioning to HR in 2010. She currently oversees HR and talent at Pluribus Digital, a digital service firm that supports public service missions. In her spare time, she enjoys exploring new restaurants in the DC area, as well as exploring new places to travel domestically and abroad.
Hi, everybody.
Our second panelist this evening is Morgan Small. Morgan is a business and data analytics professional at PNC Bank. Her role involves doing performance and metric reporting, as well as standing up a new predictive analytics data science capability in her department. She received her undergraduate degree from Penn State in Management Information Systems, and her master's is from Georgia Tech in Analytics. Hey, Georgia. Morgan currently resides in Pittsburgh and enjoys trying new restaurants, traveling, and reading outside of work.
Thank you. Hi.
All right. Next up is Dave Isaac. Dave received his bachelor's from Providence College and is currently the manager of talent acquisition at BitSite. He has been with BitSite for more than 5 years and runs a global team responsible for both technical and non-technical requirements. When not working, David lives locally in Boston with his fiance and enjoys exploring local breweries and restaurants and spending time at home with his kitten. Oh.
Hi, everyone.
Alrighty. And last but not least is Kanchan Kaur. Kanchan is a graduate of UC Davis, where she majored in computer science. She has prior experience in software engineering at NASA JPL and currently works as a product manager for Microsoft Teams platform. She's also a member of GWC's Alumni Advisory Council. Outside work, Kanchan enjoys dancing, going to the beach, watching a good show, and hanging out with friends and family.
Thanks, Celeste. Hey, everyone.
Thank you all for joining us this evening. Let's go ahead and jump into our discussion. So the first thing I'm going to ask is, well, it's generally considered good advice to research the company and requirements of the job you're interviewing for in advance. but what specific information should candidates focus on? And Dave, I think I'll go to you first with that.
Yeah. So from my perspective, obviously I run recruiting at BitSite. There's a couple of different things that can kind of pile up on top of each other when it comes to like later on in the interview process that you can kind of pull from in the actual kind of research of the company. But I would say some of the biggest important factors would be like understanding kind of what the values of the company are. So at BitSite, for instance, about a year ago now, we rolled out structured interviewing to try our best to kind of pull out unconscious bias. And part of that is we've kind of tailored questions around our core values. And our core values are actually on our website. So that's something candidates can see. And then just understanding also kind of the value proposition of the company and the product itself, because as a recruiter, when I talk to candidates, I give a 10,000-foot view. But at the same time, I want to go into the conversation with an understanding the candidates have done at least looked at the website, just because at the end of the day, a lot of candidates right now are applying to jobs, and there are a lot of people I talk to on a regular basis. So what sets candidates apart are showing that they actually kind of care about the job and aren't just kind of applying to jobs just for a job.
Great answer. And Dave actually touched on something that I'd like to follow up with for the rest of you. Where do you find the information that candidates should focus on? And Dave mentioned like the core values on the website and just exploring the job. But if you guys could all touch on that too a little bit, that'd be great.
Yeah. So Glassdoor is another big one as well. You can tell a lot about a company based on kind of reviews. Obviously, take it with a grain of salt. I think a lot of the times Glassdoor, it can be the two extremes. It can be people that love their company or people that absolutely hate something. And a lot of times it's not the middle ground, but I think it still gives you some insight.
I can add to that really quickly. For everyone on the call is some sort of a technologist, right? Or aiming to be one. And not all companies have the best website, right? And maybe they, you know, from a design or branding standpoint, it's a great place to start in terms of research. But I also think that, you know, looking at employees of the companies on LinkedIn, their pages, the posts that they choose to post about whatever the content is that they're posting, or the company page on LinkedIn itself. Again, it's about gaining traction in the market with candidates and making sure that your brand is reputable. And I mean, I have some feedback about our own website, so I'm not here to knock anyone else except for put myself at the forefront of that. But you know, we try to do a good job as a company of saying, hey, our values are X on our website. And the posts that we have on LinkedIn showcase those values either through engagement initiatives or how we recognize and highlight employees. So that's just another place that you can capture some of that information as you're prepping for interviews.
And just to piggyback really quick, because you made a really good point. I think PNC also is very active in their corporate LinkedIn. That's a really good way to also see the company culture, what you expect kind of out of how it works in the workplace. If they have a large market presence, if you're in person or you're virtual, if they have fun events, if they're in the community. So yeah, I think like she said, like what everyone said so far, the website, the company's website is probably your first stop, and then social media is really big now, regardless of the kind of companies.
Just to kind of piggyback off of what everyone else has said, definitely start off at the company website. You really want to focus in on the mission and the values, but also look at like, what are some of the cool things that the company is doing right now? Oftentimes, the company highlights some of those things. Maybe there will be links to blog posts, news articles, anything like that, kind of highlighting like, these are the trends that the company is investing in. These are the things the company is passionate about right now, and see if there's a way that you can kind of tie in your own personal interests or experience into that. And that would be a really strong way to show that like you've done your research, you're interested, and there's a possible match there.
Great. Before we move on to the next question, I just want to remind all of our attendees that if you have any questions about anything that our panelists have brought up while they're answering the questions, feel free to drop those in the chat or the Q&A. Just a reminder, that way you don't forget and you have to hold on till the end of the webinar to get your answer. All right, so let's move on. What do you think about researching your interviewer? What is important to know about the interviewer before you go into the interview? And what do you think about connecting on LinkedIn with the interviewer before the interview? Halai, you want to take this one first?
I'm so glad you called on me because I really wanted to answer this question. And the reason is because you really want a job, whether that's just to ensure you have a steady income or because you really want to be a part of that company. The interviewer and their role in the job process or the role that they have at the company that you're trying to join can tell you the most about whether that job is even a fit for you. And I think when you're researching the interviewer, you want to know potentially, if you can ask the recruiter this, why that person is involved in the interview process. Like, are they the hiring manager? Are they going to be your colleague and a peer on your team? That would, like, knowing those basics about who the interviewer is and what role they play in the process is going to tell you a lot about what type of questions to ask them and give you insight, right? Because you're also there interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing you. So get to know who that interviewer is and, like, honestly, how you can leverage them as giving you intel for that interview or for future interviews. So I honestly emphasize, like, researching the interviewer more than in researching the company, because that person is also going to be your advocate potentially down the line. And so building rapport and knowing them and asking them good questions is really helpful.
To piggyback off that, I think another piece that's important is evaluating the interviewers, because seeing kind of where they came from. So let's say you're interviewing for a job and it might not be one-to-one the same job you're applying for that the person is in the seat of, but you can see their career progression. How long have they been with the company? That's a good sign for your career progression as well. I know everyone here is a little bit earlier in your career, so you can understand if the company does promote from within. And then something I also do, or something I've done in the past when I've interviewed for jobs, is I've always asked to speak with peers in the interview process. So a lot of the times, if you're interviewing for like an engineering job or like a product management job, you might meet with a lot of leadership folks. But sometimes you want to meet someone that is in your seat today because you want to get their perspective as well.
I think that that's honestly all really great advice. And I totally stand by, doing your research on the interviewer prior to the interview. I think it definitely helps in terms of guiding the conversation as well. If you have some insight into who your interviewer is ahead of time, you might be able to kind of pre-plan some questions that would be beneficial to kind of guiding the conversation and really showcasing your interest. So for example, if the interviewer is on a specific team that might be of interest to you within the company, it's a really good way to kind of get some nuggets of knowledge in terms of what that team does and really show your passion and interest in that. And even if it's not, it's also a cool opportunity to be like, what other options or opportunities are there? So maybe if you aren't the right fit for that team, it doesn't mean you aren't a fit for the company, and you might be able to like explore other opportunities in that way. So that's always something super important to do. And also thinking about your questions ahead of time is super helpful as well. You don't want to kind of go all in being like, oh, I stalked your page and I know all of this about you. But if the interviewer, is bringing up things about like their experience and their background, it would help if you have some questions that align with what you're hoping to get out of the conversation. Maybe your interviewer has had a similar career path to you, and you can get some insight or advice in terms of how you could kind of guide your own career path as well.
So I'll say my experience with this question is very different. I've only been at PNC, and I came in through a development program. So I didn't know my interviewer. They didn't tell us. And I have interviews like next week, and I don't think they know who I am. So if that does happen to you, I think it's still a safe assumption to go into the interview that the person that's interviewing you was probably in your shoes at one point. So I went through our development program. I'm interviewing for a development program. So if they come to me and ask questions of like, what did you think of the program? How did it go? What was your experience? Like that at least has like some background questions that you can think of in your mind, even if you don't know who your interviewer is, in case that situation happens. Because I know it's going to happen for someone that interviews at PNC. Yeah, that was just basically like, you might not know who they are, but don't let that psych you out. There's still some like basic questions that you can ask them, because they probably were in your shoes at one point.
And I think I forgot to answer the question about LinkedIn as well. So as far as kind of connecting with me on LinkedIn, so I don't know everyone's kind of experience with this, but as a recruiter, I get a lot of connection requests. And it's hard to like really stick out when you just send out a request. So I was thinking about it today, actually, and I was talking to my fiance about it. And what really sticks out is meeting someone in person and then sending them a follow-up note about your interaction with them, because that sticks out. It's someone that you've met in person, whether it's a phone call or at an event, and you can kind of leave a nice note, and that'll kind of stick in my mind more. And that's my perspective as someone that has a lot of connections on LinkedIn, just based on my profession. But I'd love to get someone more in the technical fields advice as well.
For me personally, I resonate with that as well. Whenever I've had an interview, I always send some sort of follow-up to my interviewers, but I like to do that after the interview as well. That's kind of my way of following up, showing that I am still interested, that I want to keep the conversation going, and I think that that's like something a lot of times is overlooked, is like after you're done with the interview, you still can kind of show that effort that you are interested, and kind of put yourself on the radar a little more.
All right, those are great advice, coming from multiple perspectives, and it is quite awesome to hear this advice. I feel like I'm learning too. Um, so a lot of interviews kick off with the dreaded "Tell me a little about yourself" question. What role do you think that storytelling plays in interviews? And how can candidates effectively communicate their experiences and accomplishments through like an elevator pitch without sounding like a robot or like they're running lines that they've rehearsed? Morgan, do you want to take this one first?
Sure. So the one thing that I think is a really good thing. The reason why this is a question is we really want to hear how you talk about your experiences, what you've done. We're listening to your like communication skills. We're also trying to pick up things that you've done, and kind of trying to get like your personality. Because this elevator pitch can be as personal or professional as you want it to be. So I know like a lot of students now have personal projects. So this is a great time to show off that personal project. If your schoolwork isn't as exciting, that shows that you're passionate, that you care, and that you have like a strong ambition, which is what we're looking for. Um, and so I think the way to not sound like a robot, practice with your friends, practice with someone who doesn't know you so they can give you some honest feedback of like, I still don't know what you said, or I don't know what you're talking about. So don't just practice with friends. Friends will be easiest, but try and get an outside perspective as well.
And I'll add to that, like, when you say practice, right? I've actually done this with like, I'm going to use the example of like all my little cousins see me as the head of HR and they come to me for every HR question, right? And they would come to me like if I'm actually updating one of their resumes right now. I'm not a big person on like one resume template is gold. There's different resume templates that work for everyone, but people that typically are having trouble verbalizing an elevator pitch do better when there's like an objective or a summary that they feel good about, summary statement on their resume. And that, I mean, you're not going to write like a long essay as your objective on your resume. It's like probably 2 to 3 lines. So if you're a better writer and you feel better as a writer, and you nail that statement on your resume, then you can vocalize that like on a call. Obviously, your resume would also be in front of that recruiter, so you're not reading from it, but at least you feel comfortable with how you present yourself in writing, and then you could start to get comfortable with it verbally, so you're not just like regurgitating everything that's on your resume or every internship that you've had. So yeah, like that's my feedback back to people is like, if you don't feel comfortable with it, part of the practicing element, to Morgan's point, is like, some people are just better writers. So focus on that and then get comfortable with it and start to practice how you would say it verbally.
I agree with that. And then as far as kind of why the question's asked, a lot of times there's no right or wrong answer. It's all about your communication. Like, can you tell me kind of concisely what the important parts of your career are, or school, or internship? And it's similar to a resume. A lot of people ask me, how long does a resume need to be? There's no right or wrong answer necessarily, but I say between like usually 1 to 2 pages, as long as you're not like just beating the resume down with every little thing that's happened in your life. I would say keep it concise. If it's something that you're proud of, a proud project, write it down. And similarly, when you're having that conversation with your elevator pitch, kind of touch upon what you're most proud of. Because a lot of the times, as the recruiter, I want to see what you're passionate about. Because that's what I want to hear about.
This is really great advice. Just I'll kind of split this into sort of 2 subtopics here. So for the first one, in terms of an elevator pitch, I like to think of that as it's sort of a long enough time to get your point across, but short enough to leave it open for follow-up. And so when I think of an elevator pitch, I always want to like try to practice ahead of time, whether it be like for an interview, or if I'm going to any networking stuff, like I'm always practicing it just so it comes off more natural. And I'm really just being effective in the time that I have. And so I kind of like to have like some sort of structure behind it as well. So really kind of going into, who are you? What do you do? What is your background? What is your intent? Like kind of what you hope to get out of this conversation, and where do you want to be? And then end it with like a call to action. So maybe that being, maybe I can set some time for us to connect, or something like that. And so really the goal there is that the elevator pitch leads to something else, whether that be a longer conversation just for some insights, an interview, whatever it is that you're looking for. And then in terms of storytelling in an interview specifically, that is so important. You want to be able to communicate your experience and your accomplishments effectively and articulate that clearly. The interviewer doesn't have the same context that you do. They weren't there with you during the time that you were working on all of those things. And so you want to practice really highlighting kind of the brief overview of whatever it is that you've worked on, and then highlighting the impact that you had. And that's also something I feel like a lot of times gets lost, is you're super excited talking about the project that you worked on, that you're not necessarily emphasizing the impact that you had. And that's really, really powerful in demonstrating your capabilities and what you could bring to the team.
Love that answer. All right. So what are some other common interview questions that candidates should always be prepared to answer? And how can they respond effectively? Kanchan, you want to take this one first?
Yeah, of course. So I think this definitely varies depending on the type of interview that it is as well. So maybe it's like a phone screen or an initial interview versus like a behavioral interview or technical interview. So depending on the kind of interview that it is, and also for the type of role that it is, you want to do your research accordingly. For example, like if you're interviewing for a consulting role, you might want to spend some time doing case studies or something like that. Whereas if you're interviewing for a dev role, you want to really make sure you understand like technical concepts and all of that. But in general, if we're talking behavioral here, a lot of times, like I've run into situational questions like, tell me about a time where you ran into this situation and how did you successfully navigate it? So for example, tell me about a time where you led a project or where you had a successful outcome. What was a challenge that you faced and how did you resolve that challenge? Was there anything that you could have improved on? And so a lot of times this is again where storytelling kind of comes to play. I've noticed that like the first question leads to smaller questions afterwards as follow-up. So if it is like about a project or something that you've worked on, there's going to be like smaller follow-ups afterwards. So definitely think about kind of like what went well, what would you improve on, some challenges that you faced, and really kind of highlighting like not just your technical skills necessarily, but also how you work in a team. And I think that's a great way to kind of showcase like you as an individual. You're more than just like the work that you do, but it's also how do you communicate with others and work in a team.
Yeah, so a lot of the questions we use at BitSite are around just similar to what Kanchan just mentioned, but it's all about situations, it's about conflict, it's about if there is a hiccup, like how do you deal with the hiccup? And a lot of it is just seeing if you're a team player or a problem solver. Another good question that I personally always ask people is this is not applicable if it's your first job, but if it's your second job, why are you looking? And I always ask that question because anyone can be looking for any reason. But you can also tell kind of the characteristics of an individual based on how they answer that question. So if a lot of times people aren't happy where they are, but you don't want to bash your employer, and that comes off to the interviewer. So that's my biggest tip to anyone that is looking for their second job or third job, whatever it might be. Always spin things to be positive, and it's all about growth and trying your best to be positive.
Spinning like to the positive is interesting because to Kanchan's point earlier, like behavioral based interviewing or behavioral based questions are going to ask you situational things. And a recruiter may say, tell me about a time that you had to lead X type of project and how you successfully led it. Or they may just say, tell me about a time when you were bored on the job, without saying, and how did you make it more interesting? Because especially from a storytelling standpoint, a recruiter doesn't want to lead you to the positive. They just want to say, tell me about a situation time where you were dealt with this type of situation, and see, to Dave's point, if you're going to take like a growth perspective or a positive mindset and how you answered it or how you are a problem solver. So they'll like leave it open-ended. And if you take it down the negative route, that says a lot about how you deal with conflict or whatever it may be. So be cognizant of the storytelling component that we were speaking about earlier, is that the story is saying, I was dealt with this situation, or this is how I handled it. And these are the positive implications of the measures that I took.
I mean, I really can't follow. I can't beat anything that everyone said, because this was really good advice. So kind of like to, again, piggyback, especially if you get any of the questions that are like, tell me about a weakness, again, spin it to that positive perspective. Like, you're not perfect, but don't downplay or don't I don't know, expand on a weakness that you think is a weakness that really could just be an opportunity instead. So yeah, I think I love how everyone has said it, but like spinning it to a positive light instead of a negative.
Right. Morgan, I'll just come back to you with this next one. At the end of an interview, interviewers typically ask, do you have any questions for me? How can candidates use their pre interview research to formulate thoughtful questions for the interviewer?
Yeah, so I think this goes back really well to our first and second questions of researching the company, researching the person. This is your time, if you haven't asked the question already, to interview the company that you're interviewing for. So ask them about the company culture, ask them about what other things that they do that's outside of their day job. Ask them about any opportunities for stretch assignments or other skill like availability to expand your skills. Ask about as the internal mobility, because those are the questions that are really important that you don't want to forget once you're already in the company, because then it just makes it harder for either you don't want to stay or continue to be motivated. So again, this is your time to interview the company and find out if you will also be a very good fit for them.
And I think it's important to always ask questions. It shows your interest as well. And obviously, as Morgan mentioned, it's your opportunity to interview the company. It's not one-sided. So that's what I always tell candidates, where when you get past the recruiter and you talk to hiring manager or other members of the team, understand kind of why they're in the seat. Why did they choose BitSight in my situation? I've been with BitSight for 5 years, and my favorite questions are why people ask me why I've been with BitSight for 5 years and why I haven't left. And I always give people an interesting perspective. I don't have this on my LinkedIn, but I left BitSight for a job to join a seed round company. And then 5 months later, I regretted that choice and texted my boss, and she brought me back. So that's my number one story. I tell people of why I joined BitSight and why I stayed at BitSight. So that's the type of question that I like to ask people, is why you chose your job and how you've moved up as well.
I just want to say that to Dave's point, that is one of the questions that I always try to ask as well. I always like to connect my questions at the end of an interview to something that the interviewer had mentioned during the interview, to just show that I was listening and trying to make it a little more conversational as well. And so typically in the beginning of the interviewer kind of gives like an overview of how long they've been at the company or something like that. And so maybe they'll say like, oh, I've been at X company for 5 years. And then at the end, you could be like, okay, well, I remember, you had mentioned you've been here at 5 years. Why did you choose to be here? And what's kind of led you to stay being here for that long, and that kind of stuff. And it just kind of shows that you were paying attention and that you are interested. And also you get some insight into the company culture there. And also, if it is like something that you are interested in, again, like I kind of mentioned this in the first question or second question as well, but if there is a connection to like a particular industry that you're interested in, particular products or services that the company offers, anything specific to like teams that you know of, anything like that, that you are interested in, like this is the perfect time to bring it up if it hasn't been brought up in the interview, really highlighting that you're passionate about this space, and that you've taken the time to like, do your research, that you're interested, that you're a good fit for this company. And also think about like role specific questions as well. Maybe what are some of the challenges that people in the role are currently facing, and what are the current challenges in that area today, or maybe what's a day in the life of this role look like at the company, stuff like that, just to get a little more insight and show that you're interested in that area. For early in career folks, like I think this is a really cool opportunity because you don't have a lot of insight. And so this is like a great way to show that you are interested and that you have the interest in growing and learning. And I think that that's like one of the biggest things recruiters would look for. And I'm not a recruiter, but I am early in career. And so that's something that has brought me a lot of success in my interviews. And so I'm definitely try to keep that in mind.
One thing that I wanted to add, because I think this is all great. I want to know how interested people are in building their career and learning about the company and all those questions. If you reach, it gets tough, right? When you're like in the third or fourth stage of an interview, when you're in those final stages, you're down to the wire. So you're probably one of 5 candidates, one of 3, or one of 2 candidates, right? In the final stages. And so I always like to hear people ask me, if I'm in that final round as an interviewer, is there anything that I haven't shared, or is there anything else that I can add details on, or give you more insight into that'll allow you to determine if I'm the right fit for the job? So basically, like, this is your last ditch effort to say, what else do you need from me to show to you that, like, you want to hire me, right? So like, and it's not coming from a place of arrogance. It's really like, this may be your last chance. So give yourself that opportunity to close it out strong, and be prepared for whatever it is that they're going to ask you, right? Like, they may need clarity on something. And I wouldn't say this to a room full of recruiters or other HR folks, but you also as a candidate have every right to ask about salary ranges. And if it's not posted on the job, at a certain point, you also need to self-select out or self-select in based on what you need to pay your bills. So and that's why, like, there are pay transparency laws. Not in every state, it's not a federal law yet, but certain states do need to post about their salary ranges with jobs. So you're entitled to, at a certain point in the, it's probably not that tactful if you do it first thing right out the gate, but you can ask, is there a salary range budgeted for this position? And that's a very fair question.
That is a great way to ask that. All right. So, last question before we move on to audience Q&A. Can you share some examples of questions or behaviors of candidates that impressed you during your interviews with them? Halai, I'll come back to you first with that one.
Honestly, I think one of the, and this goes back to my example about the website earlier, I actually had someone ask me a question about what we want the story of our culture to be on our website. And the reason why that resonated with me is because they were a designer and they were like a UXer, and I answered the question and the person told me pointedly, I hear that loud and clear in every interview. I want to join this company because I love every single person that I met with. And I think the culture really resonated with me by these conversations that I've had. But as a candidate, I did not see that on your website. So that was like it was like, okay, they're a designer, they're looking at our website, but they're also having that like UX research type of lens. And it really sat with me and stuck with me because it was like, they also gave me some feedback. Like, I was like, ooh, I don't want candidates to be deterred by our website. So that's something that was truly memorable for me.
Dave, Morgan, Kanchan, anybody impress you lately with an interview question?
It wasn't a question, or maybe it was a response to a question. I haven't interviewed a ton, and a lot of people that I have interviewed have been early career for like internships or development programs. And honestly, I love when students come and talk about personal passion projects. So I'm in analytics and data's everywhere. So if you come into an interview and you're just like, I have always played an instrument, and I really wanted to get in to see if there's some correlation between playing an instrument and something else. I'm like, huh, I like why? Like, I want to know more about like why you chose that as a project. Um, and then that helps to like highlight your skills, your passion, and things like that. So I would just say like my favorite is when they come in with personal projects. You do not have to have a personal project. It is just a thing that I've started to see more often, that I feel like does help candidates stand out.
Something I had recently that a candidate did was we were talking about one of the recs I was hiring for. And we talked about a few points that were important for the role that the candidate was trying to remember from their past experience, and wasn't able to articulate it fully in that phone call, in that 20-minute phone call we had. So she actually sent me a follow-up email with some of those bullet points, which was super helpful because it showed that obviously she was passionate, she cared. She, at the moment, was blanking on it, but the follow-up was obviously nice and thoughtful, and we were able to push the candidate through because they had all the skills that we were looking for. So I thought that was nice. And I saw someone ask the question if follow-up emails are, if you should send follow-up emails, and I do recommend them. So just ask the recruiter what all the interviewers' emails are. And you can just send them emails. Some companies might be weird about it. BitSite's totally fine with it, but if a company's being weird about sharing email addresses, just share a note with the recruiter and they can share it with the interview team as well. And that is a nice touch. I've gotten a lot of feedback from hiring teams about candidates that obviously enjoyed the process and were positive about it after the fact.
There are sort of 2 points here that I wanted to make. The first is, especially for like technical roles, I think there's a lot of emphasis on highlighting your technical accomplishments and the work that you've done on various projects. So if you have like other experiences, maybe you're in executive position for a club on campus or something like that, that kind of highlights a different skill set. I think adding that extra sort of flavor can really make you stand out as a candidate as well. And then the second point is, depending on the kind of role that it is and how much time you have, and also how interested you are in that company or the role, spend some extra time digging into it. For example, I'm a product manager, so I really focus on like products and diving deeper into that. And so if I was interviewing for a product manager role, I definitely want to know like what the product is that I would probably be talking about or working on, and kind of have like some sort of ideas in terms of these are problem areas, things that could be better, and kind of get some of those points across to show like that you are creative, that you have new ideas, you can offer some cool insights and perspectives.
All right. Thank you all so much for sharing your insights. We're going to move on now to a couple questions from our audience. Remember, if you do have a question for the panelists, you can drop it in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. But the first one that has come in is, as an early professional, a piece of advice I often hear is to apply everywhere and not to limit yourself in terms of industry. Is it okay to apply and continue in the interview process if you're not particularly interested in the company itself, but more so the role that they're offering? I'll let anybody jump in on that one.
I'll start because I work at a bank and I never thought I would work at a bank. I think it's still a good idea to interview and try out different companies and different industries. I might work at a bank, but like I know like almost nothing about banking. I know more about like the technical aspect, like how we built our online banking and how like our security and architecture and things like that work behind the scenes. But I mean, if you start asking me about balance sheets and stuff, I don't know. I don't know. So I don't think it hurts to apply for other industries, because honestly, like I wouldn't have known that like this type of job was available at a bank. So that's again where like during the interview, you can ask those questions of like, what are the types of projects? They might not be able to tell you specifically, but they can still give you like a good idea to see if it would be a good fit for you, even though you're not as familiar or excited about the industry.
Yeah, to piggyback off that, so BitSide, we're a cybersecurity company, and I work with a lot of software engineers. I hire a lot of software engineers, and a lot of them don't really care about cybersecurity. They really are more passionate about the projects they're working on. So that's why they work at BitSide. Similarly, I'm a recruiter. I'm not the most technical person in the world. I'm not a cybersecurity expert, but I enjoy kind of the value BitSight provides the world, but also the people and the culture of the company. So I think the projects, culture, people are all different aspects you can take into account when you're kind of choosing your home when it comes to your next career.
Just to add really quickly on that one as well, especially for early in career, like I think it's a really great opportunity to just expand your knowledge. We might not know like too much about an industry if we haven't had experience in it. So if you have made it to the interview, especially if it's a role that you care about, like have that conversation with like the interviewer and kind of go through the process and see like maybe this is something that is actually interesting to you and something that you might be able to pursue. And for me, like when I've gone through interviews and had conversations with like interviewers and explored like projects that are being done and things that are being worked on, I'm like, okay, wow, like this is pretty cool. I wouldn't have imagined this as like a possibility. And so it's possible that you find yourself in that category, and that's great. And on the flip side, if you end up like in the situation where you're just like, okay, this is not for me, like that's also great insight to have. So you know, like you don't need to spend your energy and your resources going after those kinds of roles.
All right. Another audience question that we got was I was let go from my previous company a year ago and took some time off from applying to jobs to focus on family. Do you have any suggestions on how to explain this in a positive way when asked either why I left or about the gap?
So
You can go
go
ahead.
ahead. Oh no, go ahead.
I was gonna say that it's fairly like in today's economic world, it's pretty common that people are being affected negatively through layoffs, mass layoffs. So I think it's pretty normal. But as far as spinning it, I don't think you need to do like a ton of spinning work. It's more of just explaining, hey, I was affected negatively by a layoff, but I decided to kind of set some time aside for myself and kind of focus on family. And you don't even have to go into details or anything. Just keep it simple. Let them know you're negatively affected, and I think most people understand.
And like companies, tenure, people, interviews are so much less robotic in today's world. So like we're all humans. We all have lives. Like things happen. And Dave made a great point about like the state of the market right now, and there's so many layoffs and that sort of thing, but then also the human element of like, if you need to say that you took care, you don't have to go into detail, but if you say took some time to tend to my family, great. Like, and if a company judges you for that, remember, that's probably not the company for you, right? So you're also interviewing them. So again, no need to spin it to the positive or try to say that you accomplished X, Y, or Z during your time off. Like, no, it's just you're human with life circumstances and it's happened. So just speak to it. And not everyone's working at, not saying this is bad, but it's not like the General Motors time or era where you're at a company for 25 years and retiring from said company, which if you do, great. But there's also people that are moving around a lot or taking breaks or taking sabbaticals, and that's becoming more of the norm.
Great answers. We have a couple more minutes for just one more audience question. So I will go with this one. On our resume, should we include technical skills that we are not proficient in? For example, I know SQL programming, but I'm not that great at it. What do we think about that?
I was just gonna say, you guys are early career, especially because you're early career, put it on your resume. Even if you've only just had a class on it, that at least shows that like you're not starting from nothing. A lot of these entry level positions, they'll teach you. What I learned in school for Python is not what I do at work. Our systems are different. The syntax is the same, but like our systems are different. So like put it on your resume. and definitely be honest about your competency in it. Don't lie.
Great advice.
I'll just one quick thing too, is that especially for developers, there are technical assessments and usually ones that are geared towards junior to mid-level developer roles are more academic in their assessment. So it's gonna probably be like what you learned in a book on SQL in your class versus like actually doing something in a live coding environment. So I have seen more like academic questions on technical assessments, which should make you feel more comfortable as someone who potentially is right out of a program, boot camp, or school.
Right. So, rapid fire last question for all of our panelists. What resources, such as online platforms or mock interviews, do you recommend for candidates to simulate real interview scenarios and improve their performance? So, we can just go around and give some quick answers on that.
So something that helped me when I was interviewing was, so I went to Providence for college, and they did a lot of programs with mock interviewing there. So if you are still like earlier in your career and you have good relationships with your college university, I would recommend kind of using some of those resources because typically it is free.
Yeah, definitely. I would piggyback off of that and say tap into your network. If you are active on LinkedIn, for example, like you could reach out to folks and see if someone is willing to do a mock interview with you, if they have the time, or even just like get together with some of your friends, classmates, who might have like similar background and kind of also be preparing for interviews and might be able to help you out there. Also on campus, like there's probably a lot of clubs that sometimes host like workshops and stuff like that. So stay plugged in and kind of create your support system there. And also YouTube videos. YouTube videos are super helpful and kind of thinking about how, seeing how others think about problems and how you might be able to solve it in real time.
So ironically, that was going to be my answer. YouTube videos, because a lot of companies, either the questions are very similar or there's just a lot of people who have gone through interviews for some major companies. So they have all the questions and they don't change often. So 100% YouTube videos, and then Googling, because you can also Google the same thing of like, what is the analytics interview at Google? Like you can just Google that. And a lot of times a lot of resources will come up, but don't sleep on your school and the resources they provide you for free because you're paying for it with your tuition. So,
And honestly, like you have your phone. So like a lot of interviews are virtual now. So record yourself answering questions that you either we gave you some questions in this like behavioral based questions, or you Google like what may come up in a technical interview and just record yourself and listen back. I can't tell you the number of times I've watched a Zoom recording of myself for a training I've led at the company, and I'm like, oh, I butchered that, or I really truly didn't understand what that was because you can hear it with all my ums, right? So just record yourself, answer it. That's where you can practice your elevator pitch and see how it sounds. So get comfortable in the uncomfortable a little bit.
And to piggyback off that, I think going to networking events and just different situations out there, just put yourself out there and just talk to people. I think a lot of it is just getting comfortable talking to strangers and kind of getting out of your own comfort zone. And that'll translate to interviews.
Well, we are wrapping up tonight's conversation, but don't go just yet. We have our final pre-hiring summit workshop next Wednesday, January 24th from 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern. And after next week's hiring summit, we're hosting a post-hiring summit workshop on Wednesday, January 31st, also from 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern. You can find the registration links to all of those events in the chat. And one last thing before we leave, please complete our survey. It will help us out as we plan for future events. Now, if all of our attendees would like to join me in thanking our great panelists for their time and expertise, please do so in the chat. We really appreciate all those insights and advice so much. I would like for everybody now to enjoy the rest of your night. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Celeste. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thanks.
you, everyone.
Good luck.